Okay, now this next part of the quiz, this is why I wanted to kick you out of the room for a bit, to flush some air into your brains. I don't want you to overthink what you're looking at in part C and D. Okay, so who wants to take a guess at what part C is? Phrase it for me. Say it in words. Using the correct symbol. Please, Elizabeth.
Given the red wine had no lowering effect, the data showed lower platelet aggregation.
Yes, assuming, given that the data had no lowering effect. What's the probability the data actually showed lowered platelet aggregation? So that's a conditional probability, right? Right? What are the two halves doing to each other? They are contradicting each other. Were we expecting a contradiction? Were we expecting a contradiction? We were hoping for a contradiction as researchers. Researchers are always hopeful for a contradiction because that means that their research funding is actually going towards something that's showing something changed or something is working. So we hope for that. But when we set the test up, we assume it's not going to happen. And we pretend we are pleasantly surprised when it does. And then we do a happy dance. So here's what the researchers do. Okay? Here's what the researchers do. They draw a sampling distribution that has an average platelet aggregation. We know this. We've got tens of thousands of studies done on platelet aggregation. We know how it's tied to circulation, how it's tied to overall health indicators. This is what doctors do quite often. They rule out things, they rule in things. We know that this also has a plus or minus around it. And we know that if platelet aggregation gets too high, we are worried about things like strokes, things like heart attacks, things like overworked hearts. Is a condition that when your heart has to pump too hard, I forget what it is right now, high blood pressure, I guess. So we're worried if it gets too, I think Casey making things up now. But we're worried when it gets too far this way. But the study is not interested in looking that way, right? The study is interested to see if red wine sends this way. And Brandon's going to tell me that somewhere over here, there is a level below which is what, my friend? 5%. Below which is a 5% region. And if we can get the platelet aggregation to land within that region, that means if we've controlled for everything properly, then maybe red wine's doing something. Is everybody buying that? All right. Where did it land in this study? Did it land in that red, or did it land in the nut?
1%.
This is, well, it says less than 1%, doesn't it? So FYI, that's the answer to part C, is less than 1%. It's just asking you, what is the p-value they got? It's less than 1%. You see how it says up there, p is less than 1%, big P, less than 1%? They're telling you the p-value. They didn't tell you how they calculated it. Don't worry, we'll do that today. They're just telling you that's the p-value they got. Which means red wine landed down here somewhere. Less than 1% means even further over than less than 5%. Sometimes they feel better telling you that for some reason. I don't think it's important to know if it's less than 5 versus less than 1. The kicker is it landed in that region somewhere. So do we believe that red wine is lowering platelet aggregation? I think that's why we're reading the article, yeah? I think that's why we're reading the article. So here is your average red wine platelet aggregation. Keep that on the back burner for now. On the back burner for now. We'll come back to that. We'll come back to that. Cool. Fair so far? Decent. Awesome. Okay. Part D. Using Elizabeth's language again, what's the probability the white wine had no lowering effect? Excuse me. What's the probability, given that the white wine had no lowering effect, that we saw non-lowered platelet aggregation? What are the two halves of that doing with each other? They're agreeing, are they not? We were assuming that white wine wasn't going to lower platelet aggregation, and what did white wine do? It not lowered platelet aggregation. Where did white wine land, therefore? I don't have a white marker, unfortunately. I have we'll use yellow. Yellow wine. Which kind of white wine is kind of yellow? We'll go with that. Where did it land, Ish? In here somewhere, yes? Maybe it lowered it like here, right? Maybe it lowered it here. But that's not called what?
Significant.
Good, statistically significant. It lowered it, but within a margin of error or two, which means it wasn't significantly lowered. So we're going to call this X bar for white wine platelet aggregation. How's that sound? Is that fair? Good so far. And that's about as far as the article will take you. The article says red wine lowers platelet aggregation, white wine doesn't. 2 claims, yes? 2 claims. But do you see how there potentially are 4 possible outcomes of those 2 claims? Oh, good. Maybe not. Let's go further. Let's go further. Go ahead.
No, I'm ready.
Oh, you were right. So my question is, the article has made 2 claims. Let's read them again. Platelet aggregation decreased after the red wine. That's one claim. But there were no significant changes after the white wine. Those are 2 significant claims. So for Part C, it's less than 1%, and Part D is greater than 5%. There's no math to do for Part C and Part D. Just don't get too worked up. There's no math to do. When you have the article already given to you published, they've done all the math for you. We'll start learning the math today, I promise. But as far as the article being published already with a reference and all this, the math is already given to you. Your job is to answer the question. They've given you 2 claims now, correct? They said white wine does nothing, and they said red wine does something. Do you see how there are actually 4 possibilities, and not just the 2 they gave you? Good. Why are there 4 possibilities and not just the 2 that they gave you?
False negatives and false positives.
Yes! There's a potential for a false positive in one of them, yes, and there's a potential for a false negative in the other one. They both can't have false positives and or false negatives, because one of them is a positive test result and one's a negative. Which one is the positive test result again?
Red wine.
Red wine, red wine, red wine. Everybody see why that's the positive test result? Red wine. Because we said there was a change. Because there was a change. Excellent, Paul. Excellent, Chris. There is a change with red wine. That makes it a positive test result. Positively changed from the null hypothesis. The null hypothesis says nothing's going to decrease. But red wine looks like it did decrease. That's a contradiction. That's a change. That's a positive test result. And with white wine, we said there was no change. Which means what kind of a result is that? That's a negative test result. So if you will, if you want to think of it kind of generally, a positive test result believes this guy. And a negative test result believes this guy. Does that make sense? You start here, and if you can get beyond a reasonable doubt, you point here. If you can't get beyond a reasonable doubt, you point back here. Does that make sense? It doesn't mean you know one is right or one is wrong. It doesn't mean that you know how right one is or how wrong the other one is. It just means the evidence is pointing towards one of them. And the evidence in this study for red wine points here, and the evidence in this study for white wine points here. Fair? Good. Now, let's analyze the other 2 possibilities, because you guys already identified them as false positives and false negatives, yes? Here we go. E. Oh, we already answered E and F, didn't we?
Yeah.
We just did. Okay, so we can skip the E and F. You guys are solid with E and F? We know what the yes and no's are? Good, good, good. All right. G. What type of error could you have made with respect to red wine? Vote for one, 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 vote for one. You've already called it a false positive. I love that, by the way. Just remember that a false positive is a type 1. Thank you. It's got to be a type 1. False positive, type 1. Love it. Thank you. Good? Define that error in context. One of my favorite things to make you guys do is write a little bit. I know you hate it, and I apologize. Tell me what is... Shake that head at me. I'm watching you, boy.
So this is where we ran into problems on the exam.
I know, but I love reading what you guys write, because you write wonderful stuff. Even if it doesn't feel like you are, you're writing wonderful stuff. So, you go to your neighbor. You're talking about, you know, I read it in CNN that red wine's good for you. I'm like, yeah, read that too, small pea guy. And they said, yeah. And I'm like, yeah, but it could be a type 1 error. Explain that to me. Explain that to your neighbor. What does it mean to make a type 1 error in the case of this experiment? Be brave, be brave. I know you guys can do this. I know you can do this. I know you can do this. Jake, go for it.
The test is wrong.
Well, give me more context. The test is wrong. There's 2 ways to be wrong. How about the test about red wine? Tell me why it's wrong. Conversation. I'm trimming my hedges. Go.
They said there was a change. There isn't.
Good. Can you go a little bit more detailed than that? When you said there's a change, we said that Boom, but they weren't. See, that's all I need right there. We say that the platelet aggregation was lowered, but it is not. That's all the detail I need. I love the fact that the test is wrong. I mean, yes. But explain to your neighbor what that means. The neighbor's going to need to hear that, well, it said it clears your arteries, but it actually might not. That's what a type 1 error actually is. Ben, would you have phrased it differently or similarly?
Similar, I was just going to say red wine does not lower.
Good! Even though we said it did. Good, 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 good. Good, good, good. You see, equivalent statements. I love that. Fair? Good, you've defined it. What's the chance of that error?
1 in 20.
Yeah, that's a 1 in 20. False positive, assuming we're working at 95% confidence, is going to be 1 in 20. Is anybody thinking 1 in 100 because it's 0.01? Was anybody thinking that? Yeah, that's nothing wrong with thinking that actually, Jake, assuming they were testing at 99%. But the thing is, we'll never know that. And this brings up an interesting point about the way modern articles are published. They usually don't tell you what level they're testing at. They just give you the p-value, and you have to decide if you think it's showing you something interesting or not. Does that make sense? So, yeah, if you say 5%, hey, that's cool. If you say 1%, hey, that's cool. Honestly, you're never going to know unless they tell you what they tested at. Because the only way to know is to know, like Brandon did, where this line is. And the reason you know where that line is because you know how much area you left over here, i.e. you know your confidence. Does that make sense? You guys buy that? Okay, good, good. So I didn't put that as a question because it's kind of a loaded question for any study that's published in the past 20 years. Cool? Good. How about white wine? What kind of error could we have made with white wine?
Type 2.
Type 2? Type 2? Okay with type 2? So I'm out there with my, no, I'm done trimming the hedges, now I'm planting bulbs for the spring. Explain to your neighbor what that means. Yeah, he's drinking a glass of white wine on a Saturday morning. I was watching CNN. Watching CNN, they said the white wine doesn't do anything. And you say, well, you know what? That white wine might actually be doing something for you. Because the study said what? That it didn't lower platelet aggregation, but maybe it did. So go ahead and drink that white wine at 10 a.m. Drink that, what's it called with the wine? The wine and the, there's a mixed drink, a morning mixed drink, not a Bloody Mary. Is it mimosa? That's champagne, that's not white. Well, champagne is white wine, isn't it? Son of a bitch, it is white wine, sparkling white wine. There we go. Anyway, doesn't matter. What matters is you can explain to your neighbor, that because your neighbor didn't pay attention to the red and white wine. Your neighbor just says, hey, I love wine. And you say, you know what, the study said that white wine wasn't actually tied to blood platelet aggregation decrease. But they could have been wrong. They could have been wrong. Could be a false negative. What's the chance? Trick question. You don't know. Because you don't know where. If it actually does lower platelet aggregation, you don't know where it is. All you know at this point, based on this study, is the red wine curve probably looks more like that, which means on average it's lower. And the white wine curve, based on this data, looks more like that, which is too close to the null curve to call it different. Of course, it could be that the white wine curve is way the hell over here, and we just caught an outlier on that curve. It's possible. It's possible. And we measure that starting in a couple weeks. But all we know at the end of this study is that's what they came up with. And if we're good statisticians, we hope it's replicated somewhere. Is that fair? Is that believable? You guys buying this? You good? Ask some questions right now if you haven't. I got a couple quizzes planned for you guys for next week on this idea. Remember, you have a project next week too, not to dump a whole bunch of crap on your plate for next week, but I want to have quizzes too in case you want to get at them. Good? All right, make sure your name's on them. Hand them forward. Because I want to get into the nuts and bolts now. Now we got the overview down. Stoked. I appreciate your letting me take the class on this side trip for a week. This section. Oh, the temporal study from the 90s. Yes, as you hand this forward. As you hand this forward. Thank you. Thank you. I totally forgot. So I'm 41. I'm 41. I'm constantly blaming my age on all of my limitations. I constantly blame my limitations on my age, whatever. I can't even talk right now because I'm so damn old. I'm senile. So, you know, I can't keep up with the kids in total fit. I'm 41, I'm old. I can't keep up with people in the plots because I'm old. So this researcher was interested in this phenomenon is maybe it's a self-fulfilling principle. Maybe it's the fact that I'm calling myself old Maybe that's making me feel older than I actually am because I keep referring to myself as old. So, as a study, what this person did was she took people, now I haven't gotten much of the detail because I was doing this conversationally through friends and they're remembering the study. She took small groups of people and painstakingly created 20 years hence, is hence backwards, 20 years before, a situation, so it's 2014. She built essentially an apartment that looked like it was 1994. Maybe like a Nirvana poster on the wall. Right? And she had for weeks these people live, kind of like, I'm envisioning Friends, the show Friends, right?
Yeah.
Live in this apartment in 1994 for a couple weeks. Before they went into the apartment, she took a bunch of physiological measures. That's what got my attention. She took things like posture. At rest, where's your posture? What angle is your spine at? What's your circulation? What's this? What's that? A bunch of physiological measures. And then when they left, she took the measures again. And she found that many of the physiological measures corrected back to as if the people were younger. Which means just thinking you're in a place where you're acting and consuming the culture and consuming the media of 20 years ago made them physiologically appear to be 20 years younger. Now I want to look at the actual results of the study to see if there were any kind of more qualitative results as a result, because I don't know. I mean, this is all I've gotten so far. I mean, I'm intrigued, right? I'm intrigued. Now I remember about 3 weeks ago driving over to Portland to play a show, and my buddy who was with me had his phone plugged into the radio, and he fired up the Bouncing Souls, The Good, the Bad, the Argyle album, which is one of my first punk albums from back in the 90s, one of the neatest albums, and we both started screaming along, every word, over Mount Hood, screaming, and I got done, I'm like, man, I feel lighter. But that's a feel, right? I feel lighter, because I'm screaming punk rock music for 36 minutes, I got no voice, I feel like I'm at a show again, right? But who the hell knows if that's actually physiologically measurable or just an emotion? That's why I want to see this study. It seems to have attached a quantifiable, measurable metric to aging. Very, very interested.
I want to see this apartment.
Me too. Well, just put an episode of Friends on, I think. That's what I'm envisioning in my mind.
Like, did they like restrict the internet to these
I don't know. Did just dial up that froze constantly? I don't know. I need to. Literally, I got this right before class, so I haven't dove in. If I can find the results, you'll have a quiz on it, I guarantee.
Just reruns of like Full House on the TV.
John Stamos, Genius. From the 90s? Jeez, I've lost the 80s versus the
So if I
90s
start
now.
living in an apartment from the 80s, I can erase my marriage? Is that
I don't know. I don't know. I'm just saying. Sorry, I brought it up now. But I do want to look into it. I don't know. I mean, apparently, and it was ridiculously expensive to do, and that's why I brought up the sample sizes being small.
Yeah, they had the vintage all
They
that.
had the vintage all the Imagine how expensive that stuff is, right? I got a Nightmare Before Christmas watch. It cost me $800 at a pawn shop. You got it for free at Burger King in 1992.
Yeah.
So,
We're classic now.
we're vintage. Watch it.
Classic.
No, I'm kidding. Classic vintage. So I do want to find out that study. But, Jake, you mentioned about wine before. I want to tie that in too. Thank you for reminding me of that, Elizabeth. And I am going to, it's on the docket to actually research and find out because I want to know what they measured. I really want to know what was measured. The wine, though. So, 244, we stop here with the quiz, right? We're done. We're done talking about it. What does 246 ask? Where are your guys' quizzes? Here they are. What does 246 then ask about the red wine? Say that again.
What the actual numbers were?
Well, maybe, but that could technically be a 244 question. They've hidden them from us in this article. We're gonna uncover them in a minute here when we get to our flu vaccine. Very good.
Does it have to do with the alcohol versus like the grape juice?
I was thinking of one three-letter word. Why does red wine do that? So then we start going, okay, is it the alcohol? Is it the difference in the red wine versus the white wine? See, this is two questions that I come up with. So that's why when you said, if I make sauce with red wine, it negates the effect. Well, that kind of makes it seem like the alcohol is the thing causing the effect. Because if you evaporate off the alcohol, then the effect is no longer there. But if that were the case, why wouldn't white wine do it?
I thought it had to do with the tannins.
I've been told that too. The tannin is a function of the skin of the grape. The
Right.
red skin versus the white skin of the grape. Which I beg the question then, can you drink red grape juice and get the same effect as red wine?
But it's got more sugars, so it probably has a detrimental effect as well.
No. This is only, well, we're going beyond it now, Aaron. We're trying to figure out why red wine doesn't. All we know is, from this study, red wine doesn't.
And grape juice, right?
Oh, does it say grape juice on there?
Yeah.
Well, son of a bitch, I'll stop talking about that right now. I missed that part. Wine and juice.
Grape juice and.
I kind of glossed over that. I was so focused on the wine, I forgot about the grape juice. So maybe it isn't the alcohol. Maybe it is actually the actual juice. But maybe it's the sugar. I don't know. Maybe there's more sugar in the red than the white. Maybe the added sugar does it. Then you start asking what about that particular thing is doing it. And then it becomes a totally different, I mean, it becomes a more fun spider web. And thank you for being such a critical reader, Aaron. I missed the grape juice part of that. I covered the damn thing over and everything.
I saw it like halfway through.
Good for you.
On it. I was
Wine
like,
or
oh, grape
juice. Good for you. Good for you. Jake, go.
It doesn't mention any test on grape juice though.
It doesn't. It talks about the red wine. So that might beg the next test, right?
Right.
That might beg the next test. So I don't know. To answer your question, I don't know. And I was far from a controlled study. So good. That's a 246 question, right? Going beyond. Finding why. Asking why.
But if you overcook vegetables, they lose a lot of their nutritional value too, so that could have to do with it.
Now this is interesting, right? So somebody told me in the two 244s ago that if you cook spinach, it's healthier than if you eat raw spinach. I refuse to believe that.
What?
I refuse to. Has anybody heard that?
You're denaturing your protein.
It seems strange that Mother Nature would give us something that needs to be messed with to be better for you. That just seems strange to me. So has anybody heard that study, or was that just one of those I saw it on Facebook, therefore it's true thing?
I've heard about bell peppers.
Cooking them is better than eating them raw?
Like, causes it to release something.
Oh, interesting.
Like the
Bell peppers, but not spinach, but bell peppers. See, again, I don't know these things. I mean, when you guys bring them to me, I love that. But I don't, the spinach caught me for a loop. I'm like, I eat spinach raw out of the garden all the time. Snip, boom, and it's delicious. I also like it cooked. Steaming, it's great, whatever. Fried it up in some panini squashes is also good. But the fact that it has to be cooked to be good for you just strikes me as an oversimplification of maybe a null result that it could have been that the article said cooking food does not do anything to increase nutritional value. And we see cooking food increases nutritional value. Just leave out the words that we don't like, right? It could be something like that. I don't know. I put that out there. Bell peppers I didn't know about. Thank you, Casey.